Good morning. I'd like to just again welcome you all here and say thank you so much, particularly to those who've made a long journey to be here today. It's really, really appreciated, and I hope that if today achieves nothing else, at least it will bring you all together with your shared agenda in one location, and this will be an opportunity to build links and to get to know each other a bit better, because I think that support will be invaluable in the coming months and years as this duty continues. So as some of you know, my name is Hanna McCulloch. I'm National Coordinator for Local Child Poverty Action Reports, and my post is hosted by the Improvement Service. Some of you might also know that before I was with the Improvement Service, I was at CPAG for 5 years, and we're co-hosting this event today, so it feels like a bit of a family affair, really. It's nice, although it's slightly less stressful than actually having 50 members of my own family in one room, only very slightly. So in terms of what my role actually is, key aspects of the role are to work with local authorities and territorial health boards to support the development of local child poverty action reports, to act as a child poverty champion, and to share and promote good practice. And of course, the main overarching theme of all that is that I'm working to ensure that local reports are an effective lever for tackling child poverty in Scotland. I think at this stage in the process, it's unavoidable that there's quite a lot of focus on the technical side of reporting. So, you know, what does the new duty entail? What are the processes we're going to have to go through to get these reports together? Who should be involved? What should the reports look like? And there will be a lot of discussion of these things today, and I think that's right. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to reassure you that even if it seems like I have an unhealthy obsession with the technical side of local child poverty action reports, I'm fully aware, as I know all of you are, that the reports aren't an end in themselves, and they aren't really worth the paper they're written on if they don't bring about meaningful change for the hundreds of thousands of families that are living in poverty in Scotland and living with all the stress and exhaustion and hopelessness that can sometimes bring. So the reports are a great opportunity to showcase all the fantastic work that I know is already happening locally and to share and spread that work, but also a chance to redouble our efforts and to sharpen the focus on the children that we know are at the highest risk of poverty and at those 3 key drivers that have been talked about already this morning. In the time I've got to speak to you today, I just want to go over the sort of informal survey that I've been doing since I've been in post. So I've spoken to a lot of you in the room already today. So 31 out of the 32 local authorities I've now spoken to, and Kerry Mackenzie at NHS Health Scotland has been doing a similar survey with the health boards. So I just want to talk to you about what I found out about that, and then to talk about how what I found out will inform the support that will be available to local authorities and health boards, both from the Improvement Service and from the other organisations that Paul mentioned on that are working together to provide this support. So, the first thing I'd wanted to do when I came into post was to try and speak to the local authorities directly. And if you were one of the people that I spoke to or that Kerry spoke to, you know that this wasn't a survey in the formal sense. It was really a chat, and it was just to try and get a snapshot of what's happening locally, what barriers you're focusing and what barriers you're facing, and what you need from us. And I really would like to say what a genuinely humbling experience and what a worthwhile exercise that survey was, just in terms of the experience, the passion and the commitment to this agenda. It really was overwhelming. And I did come away from each of those phone calls feeling quite uplifted and quite hopeful about this agenda, despite the difficult context we're working in, albeit slightly confused about the inner workings of local government and how all the structures fit together. So thank you with your patience for that and getting there slowly. But I really was amazed that despite the scale of the challenge and the frustration that many of us feel about the political and economic and financial context, there really was nothing but determination to make a difference and a belief that could be done. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful about. So in terms of what I found out from the survey, what was clear quite quickly was that the people that are identified as local child poverty leads, although that of course isn't a job title in itself in most areas, come from a really wide range of disciplines. So welfare rights, children's services, improvement. There really was a broad range, which is great because it means there's a wide range of expertise that are working on this agenda and we can all learn from each other. It did also become quite clear that it's a mix in terms of the seniority of the people that are taking this agenda forward, or at least those who are identified as the leads. There's no judgment attached to that sentence. I think we're going to need buy-in from leadership at the very highest level. I think that's without question. But we're also going to need it at middle management and service management level, and from people working on the front line. So I think the job title of the person identified as the lead is really secondary to whether that person is in a position to leverage change and describe change, and whether they have the right links and the right relationships to do that, which is what we'll all be working towards, I suppose. It also leads me on to the next part of the survey, which was about what structures are there in place locally to make sure that there is wide buy-in and what structures are in place to take this work forward. And again, it was quite a variable picture, less so than in terms of who the identified lead was. But I think most areas could be categorised as taking one of the following approaches. So it was either a subgroup of the community planning partnership. I think that was the most common approach. A subgroup of children's services planning through health and social care partnerships, or in some areas through a standalone commission. And in one or two areas, it was more of an ad hoc approach, with the person identified as lead making their individual approaches to different parts of the local authority and health board to take the plan forward. And again, I wouldn't say that any strategic approach is better than the other, but in terms of thinking about what a good approach might be and thinking about what you're doing locally, CPAG published a report a few years ago that looked at what boroughs and local areas had done in England and Wales, because there used to be a duty on local authorities in England and Wales to produce local child poverty strategies. So CPAG looked at those and tried to draw out what the sort of characteristics of successful local reports were. And that report's available on the K-Hub, but just to run through some of the key findings. So a high-level strategic understanding and commitment to tackling child poverty. A child poverty partnership which is governed or is a subgroup of an existing executive body within the authority. That's the approach that many are taking. Strong support from elected members, and child poverty viewed as a cross-cutting theme. And I suppose the cross-cutting theme issue is something we might want to keep an eye on, I suppose, when we're looking at the structures that are taking these plans forward. So if we have, for instance, children's services planning taking it forward, is that approach able to reach beyond children's services planning to influence on all the other levers at local authorities' disposal? It might well be that it is, but it's something that I suppose as the reports come in over the next few years, we'll be able to get a bit more insight on. I'd also asked everybody for examples of good practice in their area, and of a very unscientific survey, this was by far the least scientific part of it, because it was just off the top of your head, what do you think you're doing well locally? And there were amazing examples of good practice, and I don't regrettably have time to go into them in much detail, but I would refer you to the speakers from local areas we have today, and also the workshops, because there are examples of good practice being discussed there. NHS Health Scotland also have a directory of good practice, which they're developing, that's online and will be available through the K-Hub. So there's a lot of information available about that. I won't go into any detail. And I think what jumped out at me, even from this most unscientific of surveys was that the majority of examples of good practice, the first thing that sprang to people's minds was around income maximisation, cost of a school day, and poverty during the school holidays. And I think that's great, and I really wouldn't want to seem like I'm being negative about that, because they're really important areas and they'll be key to taking this forward. But I think it maybe does flag up the fact that, given the importance of the other levers that the local authorities and health boards and their partners have at their disposal, could we be widening our view of where our good practice should focus on? So things like housing, economic development, areas where a lot of money is already being spent. Could we do more? Could we sharpen our focus on children and families? And I realise that a lot of these agendas locally are already being delivered with socio-economic inequality and tackling poverty in mind. So I think it would just be about taking that a bit further, and also, can we focus in more on the priority groups that are identified as being at the highest risk of poverty, just to really squeeze every possible last bit of value out of the money spent locally for children and families at risk of poverty. Okay. So I also asked what the challenges you were facing were with this. And to be honest, they were quite similar. For most of the areas I spoke to, rural and remote areas had their own unique set of challenges, but generally speaking, lack of data to build a local picture and establish progress, limited resources, both financial and in terms of capacity, difficulty building local relationships in relation to child poverty, and a need to improve understanding and prioritisation of child poverty at a local level. And those challenges also fed into the answers to what support you felt you would value from the Improvement Service and national partners. So again, it fell into sort of 5 wide categories. So data and statistics, examples of good practice, networking and information exchange, support with plan development, and support with involving communities, and also with advocacy in terms of raising awareness of child poverty locally. So obviously a big part of my role will be trying to make sure you can access the support that you need with these reports. You'll be relieved to hear, as am I, that I won't be doing this alone, that this group that refers to itself as the national partners, which sounds quite grand, I suppose, but it's really just NHS Health Scotland, Child Poverty Action Group, Scottish Government, the Improvement Service, SPIRU, Scottish Poverty Inequality Research Unit, NHS Services Scotland, the Poverty Alliance and COSLA are working genuinely very closely together on this. We're meeting a minimum of every 2 months, but if the last few weeks are anything to go by, we're sending at least 100 group emails a week as well. So we really are in close contact and working together on this agenda. So I'll just touch on some of the support that we have planned for the coming year. And I would like to stress this is the beginning of a journey for everyone, including us, and we're very open to your thoughts on what we plan to provide and what else or what different might be useful. So, firstly, the difficult one, I suppose, data and evaluation. So there was a concern from the people that I spoke to that there's potentially inadequate data available locally to build up an accurate needs assessment in relation to these reports. As most of you will be aware, the 4 measures that the Scottish Government uses for its 4 targets for 2030 aren't available at local level. And that's with the exception of experimental figures on combined low income and material deprivation. And that's just because the national statistics are based on a sample that isn't big enough to be meaningful locally. So in terms of the support provided, that's something particularly SPIRU and the Scottish Government will cover, I think, in their input later today. My understanding is, and they're all here so they can object if I've misunderstood this, but they'll be working particularly with 1 or 2 local authorities to sort of mine local and national data to work out, or to help work out what is available and what might be useful, so that information can then be shared with other areas that might want to replicate that approach. The other part of that, the evaluation part, highlights the concern that it'll be extremely difficult to show that the actions that you identify in your reports are actually having an impact on child poverty. And that's compounded by the wider economic and financial climate. We know that rates of child poverty are influenced by so many different things, including welfare reform, Brexit, the state of the economy, to name a few. So how you show a direct causal link between what you do and rates of poverty in your area, it's really difficult, if not impossible, especially given the lack of local data on those 4 measures. So what I think will be increasingly important will be to have a really strong theory as to why you believe what you're doing or what you propose to do will have an impact, and using whatever information that you have at your disposal or could realistically and proportionately collect to show the impact, and establish whether your actions are in fact having a difference, particularly on those 3 key drivers and particularly on those priority groups that are identified in the guidance. So to sort of help with that process, NHS Health Scotland have developed an outcome-based planning tool, which is available online and on the K-Hub, in which Rachel McAdams will be talking about this afternoon. And I know, I don't want to preempt what Rachel says, but I know she's happy to work with you locally or regionally to try and use that tool and to think through what meaningful indicators and methods of evaluation might look like for you. So the second item, networking and information exchange. You'll know from my incessant emails over the last 2 weeks that we're setting up a knowledge hub. We have set up a knowledge hub for local child poverty action reports, and essentially that's a place where you'll be able to chat, where you'll be able to share information, share draft reports potentially, and also have direct access to the national partners. And Mike McLean is here today, and he's going to talk you through exactly how that works and how you can get the most out of it. And we'll also be working together to facilitate more national events of this nature. And I'm also keen to have some regional events, so to bring together geographically close local authorities and territorial health boards to have discussions and maybe bring in a wider range of people than just the leads locally, but to get other people that you might want to influence locally to hear from the Scottish Government and from Improvement Service and from yourselves. So if anybody thinks that would be useful in their area, please do let me know, because I'm just at the stage of sort of trying to plan that. The survey also highlighted a demand, as I'd said, for a place to share examples of good practice. So NHS Health Scotland has that good practice directory up and running. We'll also be running webinars throughout the year to highlight examples of good practice, and I hope you will share your own examples of good practice on the K-Hub. In terms of support with local child poverty action report development, all local authorities, I don't think health boards, but local authorities should have received a letter from John McKendrick and Stephen Sinclair at Spyro, making themselves known and offering support with the development of local child poverty action reports. The national partners are planning to work together to make sure that we can provide feedback on drafts if you think that would be useful. This comes with the caveat that we don't know how many of you are going to ask for that or when, but it's something we will definitely be endeavouring to do. And Spyro will also be providing a bit more intensive support to some areas that have indicated that they would be keen to have that. And in where I'm going over time here, but in terms of the feedback that we do provide on draft reports, we'll be working together to develop a feedback framework, so something that we can share to make sure that we're feeding back on the same things, so there's a bit of consistency, and that's something that we hope will develop into a sort of self-assessment checklist that will be available to everybody, that might be useful to to have if you're facilitating discussions locally. Obviously, it's something you're free not to use, but it might be useful locally. Okay. And yeah, the final area was support around engaging people with lived experience of poverty, which will obviously be massively important in terms of ensuring we're doing the right things and that they're having the right impact. And obviously it's valuable in itself as well. So in that respect, I'd like to point you in the direction of Poverty Alliance and the Get Heard project. And that's a programme that's intended to facilitate engagement and promote public involvement in policy, particularly around poverty. And you can find out more about that on the Poverty Alliance website. Robin Tennant is also here today. There he is with his hand up at the back. Hand up again, Robin, sorry. There he is. So I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you a bit more about that today. And the other part of that was people felt that maybe tackling poverty and these reports didn't have as high a profile locally as would have been useful for them. So that's something that we'll also be working together to try and help with. So we're engaging with some of the networks that we feel have a rightful place at the forefront of this agenda. So Solace, for instance, the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives, to ensure that they're aware and are providing the requisite leadership locally and making your lives a little bit easier, giving you more allies locally. And we'll also be engaging with networks like SLADE, the Scottish Local Authorities something for economic development, I'm not sure, and the Local Area Research and Intelligence Association. So bodies that it might be easier for us to influence at a national level, but then that will then facilitate what you're doing locally. And to this end, we've also recently published a briefing that's been sent to all elected members in Scotland about the content of the Child Poverty Act and the local duty, and we'll be doing a webinar for them next week as well. So the survey also highlighted 5 difficult questions that came up again and again and again. Genuinely, it was my intention to try and cover some of these today, but there's no time. But I have actually written out a bit of thinking on these in a blog that's on the K-Hub, but I'm hoping that they will inform some of your discussion today, because these are the things that you all seem to be struggling with. So I would bear them in mind as you go into your workshops and that kind of thing today. Which is a good point to hand over to Mike McLean, who's going to talk us through the K-Hub and how to use it and what you might be able to get from it. So thank you very much.